Welcome everyone again for tuning into our committee vodcast. This is the 11th in our series, and the conversation is generally about how to build effective committees. The focus of these conversations will be around the human factor rather than the legal requirements, because we can't give you legal advice, but we can touch on some of the times when you may need to go and get legal advice or seek expert opinion. In our earlier episodes, we explored why people volunteer to be on a committee, and this is really important to understand, their experience of joining a committee, what are the most important steps for a committee to do from day one, and of course, managing your manager. Recapping just those quickly, there were 5 important steps: building relationships with the manager and the committee, creating a work plan for the year, effectively an action list for you to follow and to keep on track of what you're trying to achieve for that year, creating handover, from the outgoing committee to an incoming committee, keeping communication open and transparent, very important. And then, of course, there's that recruitment and induction. So, of course, we all struggle with how do we recruit and bring on new committee members, but ensuring when you do bring them on that you have an induction process so they feel welcome and part of the team. To review the recordings from the past sessions and to get notification of future events, you do need to subscribe to SCA Inside Strata newsletter. Just drop subscribe to Inside Strata newsletter into your search engine and you will come up with the appropriate, it's easier than me reading out a really, really long link, which is not friendly. And then what you need to do is go to the top right-hand corner and click subscribe. That will just put you on the email distribution list for when events come up. Joining us today, we have 2 of our regular commentators, Catherine Lezar. Give us a wave, Catherine, with an experience of multi-storey apartment living, many project improvements and a particular passion for sustainability. Catherine is also the first lot owner to become president of SCA WA. And more recently, we've had the expertise from David Hamilton. He is also a lot owner and a committee member with experience in multi-storey apartment living, as well as having completed the challenge of preparing his building for EV charging. David is also one of the founders of Southbank 3006, which is a new owners networking group to basically bring as much resources and information to help lot owners live in strata. David, give us a wave so we know who you are. Thank you. And today we have our special guest, Brent Clarke from WattBlock. Give us a wave, Brett, thanks, who is an expert and pioneer to help continue our discussion on sustainability and preparing for the future. So welcome to everyone. Brent, in particular, I know you've been on this journey for, a fair time, like 2015 or 16 or maybe even longer. But just to bring you up to speed, in the last 3 sessions, we have been discussing how committees consider and investigate sustainability initiatives, including be it that it's gas conversions to heat pumps, solar, EV, waste management for their strata scheme. So far, the things that we've touched on that were really important was conducting a survey, what due care and diligence means, the right way and the wrong way to go about preparing your building. In this case, the subject was for EV. And that kind of led us to this session, which is about the role and how important it is to have an expert involved so that you can get the right advice before you embark on that project, understanding in particular the building load for now and in the future. So, Brent, I'm going to ask you that question. How critical is it getting expert advice before you start? And who or what is an expert? Because we've seen a number of committees run down lines that look like, talking to their local electrician, talking to their building manager, the committee themselves, thinking and making decisions. So how important is that expert, and what do we define an expert as?
Well, thanks for having me, Julie. And I think it's a great question. People on strata committees do have areas of particular expertise, and we shouldn't ever downplay the expertise that they bring. And long-serving strata committee members also have the history of the building. They've got that corporate memory that they bring. So that's very valuable. What we have found is that in some strata committees where you've got a particular expert on the committee, and they might be an expert in, electrical or accounting or legal, sometimes that actually is not an asset to that particular committee because the other committee members aren't sure, that person brings an extra level of knowledge, and then the aspect of trust comes into play. How far can you trust that person, even though they are perhaps in their day job an expert in that area? So getting an outside expert who's not on the committee is important because it brings that arm's length capability to talk objectively, particularly without any self-serving interest. And the experts can be electricians, energy auditors, electrical engineers, solar engineers, accountants, strata lawyers, particularly strata lawyers that have had previous experience in these areas of electrifying the building, but also local councils. A number of them in different states of Australia are running sustainability programs for stratas to try and assist them. And then you've got the industry bodies, SCA, Owners Corporation Network in some states, and information services like Lookup Strata, etc. So it's actually, you need experts from a wide variety of fields, and it's not just the electrician, it's not just the facilities manager. It's it can be an energy auditor or an electrical engineer, or in the area of gas conversion, it can be people with plumbing expertise as well.
I have a question for you, Brent. So if you have a building and you've got gas in it and you want to do solar and you want to do EV, which one do you tackle first?
Yeah, so look, it's a great question. And probably what I would do is I would say the very first thing to think about to work out the order in which you do it is how well funded is your capital works reserve fund, your maintenance fund, your sinking fund, depending what state you're in. Because the first question is a financial one. And can you take on the largest projects first, or do you need to start with the smaller scale projects? So like in the instance where you had a very well-funded strata scheme, like, for example, if I take, say some sort of high rise that might have more than $500,000 sitting in the capital works fund, getting 0% interest or 0.5% interest, then you really should be tackling the biggest objective, like the gas conversion to electric heat pumps for the hot water in the first instance. And the reason for that is that will help you better size what size solar system you want on the building after it's installed and you've got better data on the operation of the heat pumps and when their cycles are. And so even though the gas conversion is the most complex, it's the biggest ticket item, it needs the most funds, it's also the one that creates the most interruption for people in the building. You'll have hot water out for 24 to 48 hours. So if you've got the funding, go for the biggest ticket item, which is that gas conversion first, and then you can follow that up with the solar and then the EV charging. If you don't have the well-funded capital works fund, then you're better off to start. You can start with one electric vehicle charge point in a visitor car parking space, and that's not a very big ticket project.
Excellent. With neighbours, so the thing that I thought about when you were speaking is if you're going to get an efficiency expert to come and do a report, wouldn't you want that to feed into your first neighbours rating at the same time?
Look, the neighbours program is it's good because it allows you to benchmark your building.
Yeah.
And it's a national program, so it works. In strata schemes across the country. It takes into account the different climatic zones as well in the calculation of the neighbours rating. So it's 100% Australia-wide. It is, however, more focused at those medium to high-rise buildings. So it's not really focused in the townhouse, villa, small scale sector of the market. And people have a different strategy when they're thinking about getting their neighbours rating. So some people want to pay for the neighbours rating up front because it does cost your strata scheme, and then use that as the incentive. Well, we might have got a bad score on our energy and our water. Use that as a driver to try and mobilise funds to make the building better. Some other people, where they know that they've got quite a good operating building from an energy and water perspective already, sort of think, well, actually, let's just put the money into the projects first and game it so that our very first rating's a very good one. So that's kind of the threshold that people are looking at as to whether you go out with your neighbours, get your neighbours rating first. And that's sort of, if you've got a poorly performing building, use that as a negative stick to kind of drive the committee. But if you know that you're quite good, you can actually run keep doing a few more projects, knowing that whenever you do rate, you'll it's really okay, we finished what we set out to do. Here's the formal recognition that we've achieved it, and now we're a 5-star building. So
yeah, that's interesting. Another question, just while we're talking about that, is that how do you find those experts, and how do you find those experts like in different states? So I know you're New South Wales and David is based in Victoria. Catherine lives in WA. So how do our participants, sort of depending on what state they're in, actually find? Is there a directory? Are there good websites? Where do we go?
Look, it's a real challenge. And, what we've started doing at WattBlock is creating lists of reputable solar installers that have references of installing on strata buildings, and we're creating a nationwide list. And the same with the EV charging installers, where we're building up that list because we keep getting asked. And there is a real risk of having a really bad experience with calling a contractor who's not experienced in strata. And we've had strata schemes sign contracts with these people who've quoted, and then they've come on site. They're about to start the project. They've realised that they didn't think of something, because it was the first time they were working on a strata building. And then we've had strata committees actually have to cancel those contracts before the install goes ahead because that person didn't have the references. So the most important thing is to try and get references of installers, whether they're heat pump installers, solar installers, EV charge station installers, where they've actually worked in the strata segment, and a real reference from a real strata building, and use that as the guide, because otherwise you'll get a contractor that want a service or break into strata, and you just don't want to be the guinea pig on their first trip into the strata segment.
I think, Julie, one of the things in the EV space has been, and I think we've touched on this before, that large strata buildings or medium-sized ones, you've had a push by equipment suppliers to provide that sort of advice, which ends up with a single solution outcome. I think one of the things that I tried to bring to committees has been some impartiality and independence in the way that the committee can get into analysing the solution they need. So I'm getting a bit of feedback on something on my sound. Hang on. Is that
It might be
is out?
that's better.
Yes. So sorry. So I was just saying, one of the things that Brent and I concentrate on is providing, particularly in the EV space, the independence away from somebody who has a solution to sell, and help an OC on the journey of making its decision path. So I think that's EV has become almost like a ground for cowboys who suddenly see this as a really popular idea, and let's go and sell things to a strata.
Yeah. So David, and I agree with that. That's, again, the benefit of having that third-party expert is that, you're looking more broadly at different solutions and the best solution that fits this particular building, not the solution a supplier has got that says, I'll make it fit kind of thing. So I think that having the expert is validated there. What about, and I know only because we touched on it previously too, was about this shortlist, as Brent is saying, that, we have a complete failure of the building industry and the quality of standards and et cetera in our sector in particular. And so that trust, that has been a common theme all the way through for us, is that trust of who do you get to do this, who's going to stick around long enough, and isn't just somebody who's a Johnny come lately and here today and gone tomorrow, and that sort of thing. And I know relationships are very important in getting this right. What's been your experience so far with, and I know you're Victorian based, but how's that experience been with the particular suppliers that you're working with, and have you got that shortlist, and where would we find that shortlist?
Well, I think just on the EV space, right, because that's where I focus, and Brent can talk more broadly. The reality is that most of what goes into putting in place in car park EV charging, the bulk of the infrastructure is very common garden product. In other words, so one of the things of doing it and managing it yourself as an OC with some assistance is that most parts of the infrastructure can be provided by a competent and reasonably skilled electrical contractor. Not a small electrical contractor, because it's generally a much more major task. It might involve upgrading main switchboards, putting in new distribution boards. Then the bit in the middle between the charger and that is, as I describe it, the secret sauce, which is the load management and billing systems. That bit should be interchangeable. So you can take that bit out and replace it, because the bits on either side of it are common, right? So that that I think gives some comfort that you're not getting into something that that is a difficulty for you going forward. So if you can keep the area of risk and technology risk simply to that key component, and that it is the bits on either side are universal and to common standards, then it's easy to survive the long-term future.
Yeah,
So,
and
David,
I think the analogy, sorry, Catherine, I was going to say the analogy is what happened in computers. You know, we had a
Yeah.
6-inch drive, a 3.25 drive, then we moved to CDs, and now we've got USBs, and now we're in the cloud. So depending on where you purchased, you know, you've got you essentially have a shelf of all these old redundant equipment because you can't run anything. But that's what you're saying.
No. I'm saying what you avoid that because you
Exactly.
use,
Yes.
you have a standards-based approach, and the only area is in the middle, and that hopefully is also built to a standard. So it's a question of who supports the software in the middle and the firmware that drives the load management. And provided you can plug and play that bit, then the risk to a building long term is low. Now, I'm making that statement. I'll leave it to Brent, to him to make take his view on the world.
I'm keen to cover off on just this bit about experts just one more time. So let's just be clear. We've now found an expert, right? Because there are lists and we've got one. And we know that we need to get somebody who's experienced in strata. And that expert, is that person the project manager, the layer that goes between the building and the contractor? Or are we talking about the contractor as the expert? Let's just be clear on who we're talking about as the expert. Please, David or Brent, or both.
Well, I'll leave it to Brent to give his view.
I think it very much depends on the project. So, like, for example, if we look at the solar industry, the way that the solar industry is structured is that you have a lot of solar marketing companies who have networks of local solar installers. And so if you're engaging the solar industry through that particular mechanism, then what we found is it doesn't help to add a second project manager on top of so that you've got project manager on top of project manager on top of subcontractor. So,
right.
Whereas, with building remediation works, the structural engineer definitely takes more of that project management role, keeping the builder honest through the remediation project. And I think, look, that's the value that someone like David is bringing in the as an ongoing project manager in the EV space, where you don't. Well, I guess you do sometimes, depending on some of the electric vehicle charging installers where they've got they're still outsourcing to a subcontractor electrician. But if, for example, you've got an electrical contractor as the prime party, then there's value in having someone like David as a project manager on top of that electrical contractor directly. So, David, do you want
but that's different to tender management as well, though, isn't it?
That's right.
So initially, the big trouble that all owners corporations have is we're trying to decide who on earth do we give the job to, and how do we know they're going to do it properly? Is that kind of thing. And so that's a lot of the tender management part. And
tender management, I would like, or sometimes called procurement, that it can be a separate phase. So you can hire an expert or a consultant for a feasibility study. Then Strata Committee can go away, think about it for 6 months, 12 months, 2 years.
Is that expensive, Brent, to do that?
It's really not that expensive.
Right.
Like, if you're thinking in the EV space, it can be less than the cost of one charge point installed in the building. And so just getting that upfront advice, but then think of that as separate, because the committee needs its own time to internalize, and then sometimes a committee will come back and they'll hire, like someone like David or WattBlock to run a procurement process,
right?
And that can be a discrete process on its own. So you're basically getting these people to go out and get 3 quotes, trying to create the best shortlist, and then do an apples for apples comparison in some of report back to the committee. So then the committee is informed on the procurement process, and then everything can stop again, and the strata committee goes away, has its deliberation period, but then they know they might have their preferred vendor ready in their back pocket, and then they're ready to initiate a project. And then they can, either go to one of those companies that is effectively a project manager, or again, hire a project manager such as David and run the implementation phase. So I think it actually helps to break it into three different, engagements, or, if you're thinking of it for a big ticket item that, could be, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah.
So what I've tried to focus in the EV space is because it's sort of such a new area for most people to think through, particularly in strata committees, is in fact that particularly the first phase, to create a scoping study and a load analysis of a building, which enables you to identify a technical solution and the commercial requirements and the legal requirements for a building, and give that body of work to an OC to think through and work on. And it might take 6 months after they've received that report, and then make a decision as to how they're going to proceed, because in part of that report is, how do you fund it? So I provide them with some ideas about how it's possible to fund, or how cheap it is in terms of funding. That is, how you can use, how you can present the cheapness of their solution. It's not a $70,000 or $100,000 problem. It might be a 51-cent problem per lot liability, and that dimensions the cost against the benefit for people. And then the committee can talk with its owners in a rational manner with that information. So I find that's been a useful process for committees. They go away, then they come back. They go away, they come back. Brett's exactly right. And, hopefully we get a lot more EV charging done, rather than people being scared by a large number.
Yeah, well, that's and that's right. So if we were to summarise, what I think you're both saying in particular is that there are essentially three stages for a committee to think of, and that it's not just a one thing. We've got to step through that process, and it starts with that feasibility study. And the feasibility study, as David said, is going to touch on the technical requirements as well as the legal requirements, which is very important for what the committee has to consider, which will also ask that question about how it's going to be funded. So that sort of feasibility side is giving, is answering all those unknown things, I think. Is that what you got from that, Catherine? That same, that same part? Then, what Brent in particular was saying, the procurement and the tender part is another optional extra that the committee can outsource to, depending on who or what it has the skills within its own committee, but it may choose to package and tender that out. That information would then come back again for consideration. And then the last stage of it then is the engagement and / construction kind of area. And that also would come, that question around that project. Each of those could have a project manager and a different project manager. They may not be the same project manager that does each of those stages. Have I got that right, our experts there, as to what our summary is? Excellent. Now, our listeners know that Brent is from WattBlock, but David, we haven't yet discussed you as your business. And would you like to just put your link to your business in the chat box so people have it for your business name as well,
Yes.
seeing that you're operating in Victoria? And Brent, I know we asked you privately by email about a supplier for Catherine to go to in WA. Is that also on your website, as it turns out, or?
We've got, it depends in what area. Like we've listed, I put in the links here, some solar installers, and there are some that are nationwide in that list.
Mm-hmm.
And again, some of the EV installers in the EV install list are nationwide as well. So yeah, so that's these are people that we've either had reach out to us and say we're engaged in the strata segment, or we've learned that they've got a history and they've got references in that strata segment. So hopefully that is of some assistance in building this out, because we need eventually, we need trusted, reliable suppliers in every state.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the quest that we should be, that database is what we should be building on, that's for sure. So so David's given us the website for his business, which is www.gic.com.au. And David acts as a consultant in this area and project manager in particular, and a great resource for us. So we're going to continue this conversation within our podcast. A big thank you to Brent from WattBlock and David as well from his own consultancy business, and we look forward to include and Catherine, as well for joining us, and we look forward to continuing the conversation next month. Thanks. That's all we have time for today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.